Taiwan is set to get many of the weapons it's ordered from the U.S. next year, putting a dent in the current $20 billion backlog. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi meets Chinese leader Xi Jinping in China in his first trip to the country in 7 years. After deadly protests erupted across the country, Indonesia's president cuts the controversial lawmaker benefits that sparked them. Plus, China prepares for a major military parade commemorating 80 years since the end of World War II, looking to use the event to reinforce its own version of history. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Leslie Liao. Taiwan is set to receive the bulk of its major weapons deliveries from the U.S. by next year. It comes as welcome news for the country, which has been waiting on a $20 billion backlog of American arms orders. Alan Liu has more.
28 U.S. tanks have been promised to Taiwan, and the final batch will be arriving in 2026. It's part of a massive delivery of weapons expected for next year. This includes anti-tank mine layer systems, reconnaissance drones, and modernized assault rifles.
相信这些系统跟武器的装备都能够有效的来去嚇阻中共。那特别是在防止他们滩岸上面的登陆，或者是防止他们的介入，亦或是能够加强我们的侦查能力。我想这些都是非常重要的及时雨。
Taiwan has shown its determination to boost its self-defense capabilities. The Defense Ministry recently proposed a special defense budget of over $23 billion to purchase additional domestic and foreign-made weapons. However, while Taiwan is seeking to buy more weapons to strengthen its defenses, a backlog of U.S. armed purchases worth over $20 billion has yet to be delivered. And this could undermine Taipei's confidence in relying on U.S. military procurements.
一直跟我说，中共这个武力威胁迫在眉睫，但是东西却还排在那边，那到底是什么时候交货？那这多多少少会影响到这个民众的信心啊。
Last week, however, the U.S. Senate Armed Services Committee Chair Roger Wicker led a delegation to Taiwan specifically to demonstrate the U.S. commitment to Taiwan's security. He also hinted at future arms cooperation between the two countries.
And that will depend on the skills present, both on this side of the Pacific Ocean and ours. And actually, we're open to suggestion and innovation.
With more defense proposals coming down the pipeline, all eyes are now on the future of this expanding collaboration between the U.S. and Taiwan. Delvin Chen and Ellen Liu for TaiwanPlus.
Several new cabinet officials were sworn into office Monday morning as the ruling party seeks to restore public confidence after a major defeat in this summer's recall elections. On the priority list for new Economy Minister Gong Mingxin are U.S. tariffs.
比如说某些产业，虽然它在美国市场上可能关税会比较高一点。 然后相对于某一些竞争对手国，它会高一点。但如果这些竞争对手国来抢在美国市场的话，那非美国市场也是有空出很大的机会啊，也值得我们多元的这个去诉求多元的市场所以任何的状况都可以让我们有路可以走有策略可以来做一些因应。
Gong takes on the role of economy minister as Taiwan deals with 20% U.S. tariffs and questions over the country's power supply. He replaces former economy minister J.W. Guo, who had one of the lowest approval ratings in the cabinet, according to a recent poll. Meanwhile, Si Liang, who previously headed the National Health Insurance Administration, takes over as health minister. He says he wants to promote President Lai Ching-te's Healthy Taiwan initiative and improve the working environment for healthcare professionals.
共同来努力落实各项的政策，那么优先的处理有关医疗韧性、心理韧性、社会韧性，那么让 民众呢都能够享受到一个从出生到安老都能够安心而这个健康的这个环境为这个健康台湾的国政愿景加速的落实。
The presidential office also announced on Monday that 2 new officials will join the National Security Council to help address threats facing Taiwan. Taiwan's new economy minister Gong Mingxin spent his first day meeting with the country's largest industry groups, saying he will hold regular meetings with them as the country faces U.S. tariffs.
每个礼拜四我们都会有这个就是会有交流了那类似这样的3个月就会一次，那3个月我们会把各个工协会他们的诉求我们会把清单列出来。
After a closed-door meeting in Taipei, Minister Gong touted government programs to help support local industrial suppliers and promote Taiwan pavilions at international exhibitions. Leaders including Young Liu, who chairs both electronics giant Foxconn and one of Taiwan's largest electronics industry groups, said he also supports this policy.
就是希望政府能够出来一些政策来鼓励我们大企业或是下游企业来主要尽量使用我们国产的零组件。还有国产的设备，工具机等等，这是一个短期可以做的。
Gong says about $160 million have been earmarked for supporting industrial upgrades using domestic suppliers. Chinese President Xi Jinping has given his vision for a new multipolar world order at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit in Tianjin.
我们率先提出共商共建共享的全球治理观，践行真正的多边主义，同联合国等国际组织深化合作，建设性参与国际和地区事务，始终站在国际公平正义一边。
More than 20 world leaders are at the summit, including Russia's Vladimir Putin and India's Narendra Modi. Xi called on the organization's members to leverage their massive collective market and cooperate further in areas like energy, infrastructure, and AI. China has promised members a combined $280 million in free aid, plus $1.4 billion in loans to a banking consortium. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping have met on the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit in Tianjin, China, in Modi's first trip to the country in 7 years. The leaders signaled a reset in relations as fresh tariffs from Washington strain U.S.-India ties. Chris Gordon reports.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi shakes hands with Chinese President Xi Jinping and First Lady Peng Liyuan at a banquet in Tianjin, China. He joins dozens of leaders from Russia to Turkey to Iran for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit. The banquet follows a closely watched bilateral meeting between Modi and Xi earlier in the day, in Modi's first visit to China in 7 years. With global tariff uncertainty rising and a fresh 50% U.S. duty on Indian goods, the two leaders used their meeting to talk trade, investment, and a fragile border thaw. Modi echoed that tone, saying direct flights, suspended for 6 years, are being resumed. Tense border disputes have been calmed, and ties are back on a positive trajectory. Washington's new tariffs on Indian goods, tied to New Delhi's purchases of Russian oil, have complicated U.S.-India ties and nudged New Delhi to hedge its diplomatic bets. But analysts say problems still persist with Beijing.
I think for India, of course, you can see this is a leverage against the U.S. tariff pressure. That's true. But we should not forget that the underlying contradiction between India and China is still unresolved. And you cannot expect that this improvement of relations can resolve the border dispute.
A bilateral meeting and a grand banquet in Tianjin has set the stage for a reset in India-China relations. But the real test will be whether the agreements on flights, trade, and a sensitive border can hold. Howard Chung and Chris Gorin for TaiwanPlus.
Hundreds of people are feared dead in eastern Afghanistan after a magnitude 6 earthquake struck around midnight local time. Afghanistan's government has reported over 800 deaths, but the shallowness of the earthquake and the remoteness of some of the affected areas mean more reports of fatalities are likely to come in. The earthquake also jolted large parts of neighboring Pakistan. Dangers come not only from collapsing buildings, but also landslides in this very mountainous region. Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto is promising to cancel perks for lawmakers that set off deadly nationwide protests. But there are still calls for protests Monday, meaning the president's biggest challenge so far may not be over. John Van Triest has more.
Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto appeals to his country's people after days of deadly violence. Flanked by political party bosses, he pledges to revoke new privileges for lawmakers that sparked widespread unrest. Those perks include what some protesters see as excess pay and $3,000 housing allowances amid hardship for working people. Lawmakers' official trips abroad are also banned for now.
Saya minta sungguh-sungguh seluruh warga negara untuk percaya kepada pemerintah, untuk tenang, pemerintah yang saya pimpin dengan semua partai politik, termasuk partai yang di luar pemerintahan, kami bertekad untuk selalu memperjuangkan kepentingan rakyat.
But the road to these concessions has been bloody. 7 are dead after peaceful protests last week escalated into clashes, looting, and arson. 3 civil servants died in this regional parliament building in South Sulawesi province Friday when a crowd set it on fire. Anger in the streets has been especially intense since last Thursday, when a police vehicle killed a bystander, a motorcycle taxi driver working for a rideshare app, leading President Prabowo to pledge a thorough investigation into police mistakes or violations. The strength of the protests has been such that Prabowo has had to cancel a trip to China to attend a massive military parade this week. This isn't to say the government is giving in to protesters. Prabowo on Sunday said some actions at the protests have, quote, leaned toward treason and terrorism, and that he'd ordered the police to crack down. Indonesia's defense minister has also pledged to deal with those who may have breached the law.
Officers will not hesitate to take firm action against rioters and looters who entered private areas or state institutions that have been ensured to always be in safe condition.
But despite concessions and tightening security, there have been calls for more protests and gatherings. This is the biggest challenge Prabowo has faced since taking office last year. And the questions of how he handles this crisis will be key to what unfolds next in the world's 4th most populous nation. Alex Chen and John Van Triest for TaiwanPlus.
Coming up after the break, commuters on Taiwan's high-speed rail network will now have to follow some new rules. We look at what those changes are when we come back.
How does Taiwan stay on the forefront of innovation in a world of uncertain tariffs, wars, and shifting geopolitics? Get answers and more, from award-winning programs to exclusive Mandarin dramas. Download the TaiwanPlus app to any device today. No ads, no bias, just facts. TaiwanPlus.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. China is gearing up for a major military parade to mark the end of World War II. It's using the event to push its narrative that the Chinese Communist Party was the main force in defeating Japan. But officials here say the Republic of China, Taiwan's official name, was the true victor in that war.
中共对抗战毫无贡献，只有利用战争来做大自己哦。中华民国在对日抗战的期间哦，中华人民共和国根本不存在。
Eric Zhu, head of the main opposition Kuomintang, has also pushed back against China's stance, emphasizing ROC's central role in the war.
抗战是中华民国政府所领导的，是中国国民党所领导的，是蒋委员长所领导的抗战。中共有参与，但是领导的是国军、国家，尤其是我们的政府，这是很清楚的历史，不容扭曲的。
For more on why China is so invested in using its version of World War II history to advance its geopolitical goals, our reporter Cadence Quaranta brings us this report.
Beijing is gearing up for a massive military parade. It's releasing dramas and documentaries. It's opening new museum exhibits. Its television channels will broadcast nearly 100 war-themed movies through the end of the year, all to mark the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. In the months before the event, Chinese President Xi Jinping and other officials have increasingly brought up China's fight against Japan during the war, through state media, at press conferences, and in speeches. The country is going to great lengths to emphasize this period in history. But the question is, why?
People like to take World War II history, as they take other history, and pick out the things that for them work as an argument about the present. And you find that all over the place. It's not just China that does it, but China is very keen in some ways to use aspects of that history to push present-day claims.
First, let's talk about China's story. China emphasizes its role in World War II and argues it was the Chinese Communist Party that led the fight against Japan during the conflict. It uses this to legitimize its rule at home, strengthen its image on the global stage, and bolster its territorial claims to Taiwan. Now, let's take a look at what actually happened.
The trouble in the Far East continues to engage worldwide attention. The Japanese army marches on at daybreak.
Conflict broke out in the 1930s as Chinese forces resisted Japanese invasion. The war killed millions of Chinese civilians and lasted until 1945, when Japan surrendered. At the time, China was governed by the Kuomintang, also known in English as the Nationalist Party, which was already in a civil war with the communists. The two sides formed a temporary alliance, but historians say the nationalists did most of the fighting in major battles, while the communists played a smaller role. The US and other outside powers also eventually joined the fight. Later, the nationalists fled to Taiwan as they were losing the Chinese Civil War, and the communists took control of the mainland. Today, the battle continues, but now it's won over memory. China downplays the roles of other actors in the war and exaggerates the Communist Party's contributions, using its claims to help bolster the party's legitimacy.
So, because the Chinese Communist Party famously is not a party that seeks legitimacy through democratic elections in the sense of multi-party elections, the historical record is very important in terms of shaping its argument that it has a right to rule. And the war against Japan as really the single most significant national crisis in terms of a conflict between two different nation states provides a very important part of that justification.
It's also using this history to bolster its reputation on the global stage by painting itself as a founding force of the post-World War II order, including the creation of the United Nations in the war's immediate aftermath, when China got one of the 5 permanent seats on the UN Security Council. This narrative leaves out one key point. China's UN seat at the time belonged to the Republic of China, led by the nationalists that later fled to Taiwan, not the communist-led People's Republic of China. The seat was only transferred to the PRC around 25 years later. Still, China uses this moment to frame itself as a responsible and stable global leader. And then there's Taiwan, which China claims as its own, using World War II history to bolster those claims.
所以它不是只有讲 不是只有讲国力战争战胜战败，而是在讲说这个战争的结果是把台湾澎湖收回来了，是他的中国的啊。
This goes back to two statements by the Allied powers towards the end of the war, the Cairo Declaration and the Potsdam Proclamation, which indicated that Taiwan should be, quote, restored to the Republic of China. Though the documents don't mention the PRC, the Chinese government uses these statements to argue Taiwan is its territory. But many other countries instead consider the Treaty of San Francisco, which formally ended the war with Japan in 1951, to be more legally important. It required Japan to, quote, renounce all right, title, and claim to Taiwan without specifying who it would be given to. China does not recognize this treaty.
所以他这些历史的论述，他就是希望去抹煞我们刚才讲的那个旧金山和平条约啦，或者说中华民国在台湾是存在的。那这些事情，对中国来讲也是很尴尬的事，所以他就这些都不谈，他只谈开罗宣言。
Much of the picture China paints of its role in World War II and its aftermath is heavily disputed. Taiwan's government has strongly criticized China's story, accusing it of distorting the facts, arguing that it was the ROC that won the war, not the PRC. But China is still marching ahead, this period of history proving a powerful tool for its ambitions in the present and the future. Hank Xu and Cadence Quaranta for TaiwanPlus.
2 Taiwanese divers have been found dead in an underwater cave off the coast of Okinawa. According to NHK, the men, both in their 20s, one of them a diving instructor, entered the water Sunday afternoon and lost contact with their group shortly afterward. After a search lasting more than 3 hours, they were found unconscious in a cave roughly 30 meters deep and later pronounced dead at the hospital. Professional cave divers say many factors could have led to their death.
Cave diving, it actually has a lot of variables that can cause an accident to happen, such as they might lost their visibility and during the cave, so they lost their navigation and they couldn't find their way out. And secondly, there might also be the failure in their gas management, which they did not plan sufficient gas for their exit. And thirdly, they might lack the training, the sufficient training for cave diving, but they dive beyond their limit.
Japanese authorities are investigating the incident. A joint initiative of public media services in Taiwan has announced plans to create an AI chatbot to combat disinformation and promote trusted news. Taiwan has been targeted with disinformation campaigns for over a decade. Studies show that more than 80% of the public have been exposed to false information. The new initiative aims to better provide the Chinese-speaking world with reliable information, including about Taiwan.
这个聊天机器人很重要的一个基础就是，我们希望是借由所有台湾公共媒体的可信资料，来作为一个资料库的基础。它跟其他的聊天机器人最大的不同就是，其他的聊天机器人会把网络上不管你是正确不正确、好的不好的资讯，全部作为它解释的来源。可是这个可信资讯的 AI 聊天机器人只会限定在 我们公共媒体所提供的资料。
The first test version of the chatbot is expected to be ready by the end of 2026. The Taiwan High Speed Rail is set to roll out new seating regulations later this month. Passengers are restricted from sitting on the floor in train carriages if they didn't buy a reserved seat and must stay quiet during their trip. The new rules come after several clashes over seating arrangements. Irene Lin has more.
The fastest public transit option in Taiwan has announced new rules for passengers starting this month. Under the new quiet travel policy, Taiwan High Speed Rail passengers must use headphones when using electronic devices and move to gangway areas between train cars to make phone calls. The new rules also restrict passengers from sitting on the aisle floor in cars and on station platforms. Those who refuse to follow the rules will be denied service. Most travelers support the new rules.
因为坐车就希望比较安静一点，对，所以讲话很大声确实会干扰到，或是手机的声音打开，戴耳机是比较好的啦，不会影响到别人。
是会有点不舒服，但是我觉得就是反正很快就忍一下嘛，不要那么机车嘛。
while some worry about passenger capacity.
第一个是票价的因素了，那自由座当然是票价比对号座当然是便宜多。那第二个也是因为真的是对于整个台湾的交通量，我觉得是人潮搭乘大众运输的这样子的概念，尤其是高铁，这样一日生活圈或是说工作往返的人，真的是相对多很多。
The high-speed rail offers cheaper non-reserved seats for those catching a last-minute ride or those who've missed a local train. This means that train cars at certain stations often fill up quickly, leaving many to fight over seats.
如果他还是决定要做的话，一定是就是站着相当不舒服。高铁要自己去解决那个运量的问题啦，不要高铁做得很优雅，但是乘客就是不舒服。
The changes come as the high-speed rail is planning to expand eastward to Yilan and southward to Pingdong. If approved, those projects could bring more passengers aboard and potentially more seating challenges.
The new rules will take effect on September 22nd. Passengers traveling long distance might want to book tickets early or risk an uncomfortable journey. Klein Wang and Irene Lin in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
And thank you for watching Taiwan Plus News. You can visit the Taiwan Plus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, take a look at the Tango World Cup in Buenos Aires, where couples from over 50 countries have turned up to compete. I'm Leslie Liao. Take care and see you next time.